Okay, this is the half Schnable. This one's going to be the 3+3 that we have here today. The same applies to the 2+2 that we make, or different axle configurations. The base idea is the same. Obviously the axle configuration is different, but from the gooseneck operation to the steering, everything will be the same. So starting here at the front, here I got a toolbox for all the extra shims and all that we're going to use to shim the fingers. We'll go through that later. Here we got electrical, air and electrical connections like you normally would see in front. This here is for the main turntable. If you look down here, there's the alignment arrow for it. And right over there, there's the steering wedge lock that we're going to be adjusting later. The steering mechanism in here is all self-contained into this section here. There's 2 pins here. We're going to go through that in a little bit why that is. Inside here, we have the power unit. I was just running it, so that's why this is open. I call it the sunroof. So you have the Honda engine. You got your pressures, pressure gauges. You got your steering manifold, and here you have all of your switchgear to make everything run. We have the wireless and wired remote here. Here we have the connection, like I said earlier, between the gooseneck. And just here there's the hoses. These are the steering hoses, start from all the way up here. They're stored into here, into this trough here. So they're all coiled up right now. On top here we have the gooseneck lock. So that's when you want to tilt, so go up or down. So you have these 4 air chambers. It's going to pick which one is the closest to the adjustment. So you'll see when they're all up now, but if we would just extend when we're on the road, you want at least one of those down. There's some on each side. Here we have the spare tire racks that are both sides. You can only put a single tire in them, so you'd be able to put 2 tires on here. Right here we have the locks for the stingers. So right now they're locked. There's no chain to have them up. It's just a ball valve. So we have them unlocked or locked. These are all the controls for the gooseneck up here. Pointing inside the gooseneck, you can see the hydraulic tank is all over there. When we'll go back, we'll see the level gauge. In here, this is to access this vertical lock here for the extended boom here. Up here we have the fingers for the gooseneck, for the Schnable, for the half Schnable. That's up there. Moving down here, you have the cable. This is for the umbilical cord. There's going to be one on each side, each umbilical cord. So this one is for the hydraulic steering, and the one on the other side is for the air and electrical connections. And then coming down here, we have the connection point between the dolly and the the gooseneck and the bogie. So there's going to be the upper, the bottom connection, and here we have the upper connection. This is connected like this. So when you're coming back empty, going down on the road, you're going to be connecting this. This is just to give that an extra point, so to keep it upright, so you're able to lift these axles up here. This here is the D-ring. There's one on each side as well. That's to connect this cable. Whenever it's going to be, this gooseneck's going to be far away, you'll have a tower. Then you're going to hook up the cable here. You're going to put a taut. All right, here we have for the front group only. There's these chains on axles. That's when you're coming back empty. You want to tighten these up so the axles doesn't overextend. So there's one on each of the front 3. Around this group, here you have the winches. We're going to go through that later. There's always a sister winch on the other side. These are the loading points. So this saddle, there's 2 saddles, this one and there's the back one. Another winch here. Here we come to the hydraulic connections. Very important that right now it's as if we'd be coming back empty. So these hoses here come back and they go through a loop like this. They go all the way out. So with this trailer right now, it's going to be on bypass mode. So this is going to tow like a regular trailer. So these axles will stay locked, and the front steering will be able to pivot freely. This one on the other side here, right now, is all these cylinders are deadheading in here. So this is essentially locking, well, essentially it is locking all of the fluid inside. So right now, the locks that are holding the trailer straight is actually this being dead-headed. If this goes here, then you get an automatic steer. I always have these two here like this, and you always make sure to have them both connected to something, so that way you don't forget it. So as soon as you switch over, then you're going to want to connect one and the other. So then you're never dead-heading this. There's only one time that we're going to have this dead-headed. It's whenever it's separated. You're not going to be steering with it. Well, when you do, it doesn't affect the coupler. So that's okay, not like a blade trailer. So this one we can have it, so we can store it, and it's going to deadhead, but it's the only time you want it to be deadhead is when you're uncoupling that front to go and tie up to the tower or go further away. But when you always connect it, always make sure that there's these two always have something in them, like that. This is the remote, the wired remote. So if you lose the wireless remote or the batteries die, you have this wired backup. If it doesn't work, probably have that's disconnected. Moving along to the air ride here. This is the front group only, so you can dump. So whenever we're on the road, this would be dumped. And like this, you can hear the air ride lifting. So what we'll do is we'll just have this dumped like this. So that reads, so that's going to be for the front group. And here, this is a coal-loss valve. So right now this is locked. So whatever the leveling valve says to do, that's what it's going to do. So you want it to go move up or down. Whenever you want to raise or lower. So right now I can raise it like this, or I can lower it. But whenever you put this back in the middle like this, you can do this. If there's an air leak, it will go all the way down. So always make sure that when you're done doing maneuver, like say you're going under something or over something and you need it to go up or down, like say a short distance, then you come back here and you just pull this back. And now whatever the air valve, the leveling valve says, this is what it's going to obey it. So very important that if you have this like this, you can either have it overextended or you're going to have an air leak and wind up with no air in your suspension. So we're just going to leave this one like this, like that. Right at the back here, there's a ratio valve. We're going to get into that ratio valve whenever we're going to be explaining how to load this trailer. In a very specific circumstance, you're going to need to use this ratio valve. For the most part, if we load up that the front and the rear group are level, we're not going to need to use this. It's here for a bit of like a last resort. We're going to go through that in a little bit. Coming here, there's some more winches. Right in there, there's the push and pull cylinders. So this rear group here is steering only, the front is straight. We got the loading bunk here. This here is the loading blocks. The reason why there's two of these, call them the smiley faces, is right here is whenever we have the tower, we want to put more weight up front, then we would button up the tower here. In some other instances, we can have it so it button up here, and we'd bolt it up here. We're going to go through that in detail whenever we do the loading exercise. Come back to the bumper here, we have the strobe light. So this is connected to your clearance lights. So as soon as you have your clearance lights on, you come in here, flick this on, these will come on. This is a 7-way plug, it's just hooked on your clearance light. So if you need to power, there's a beacon light that comes with this. You can power the beacon light, you can power extra auxiliary stuff that you need, maybe local state laws. This is the remote control here. So all the way back here, you're gonna have the wired remote you can plug into here, be able to do the steering. Here we have the alignment rod. So here we're a little off. This needs to be flush to be aligned. We're going to show you that later as well. Back here you have another plug. This here is going to be for the beacon lights, or can be on either side. This is going to be the anchors for the oversized sign. So they just go in here. We took off the sign here just so we can see inside. Moving along. The passenger side here, we have just an extra toolbox for all of the ratcheting, straps, things to stuff the saddles. The winches are, again, they're mirrored each side. This is the electrical and air connections. Here we have a ball valve We'll go through that whenever we want to move the dolly. We can use this, very useful. Coming on this side, the very last thing is right here on the tank. There's going to be the level gauge. What you're going to do now is as if you're going to be coming back empty or having the trailer empty. So what you're going to want to do is have this on bypass mode. So what that does, whenever that fifth wheel block is inside of the V of your fifth wheel, you can turn and without deadheading anything. So you have to always come back here, check. Even before you hook on, because that steering might be off or your truck might be off here. So you just make sure that this is on bypass here. So the way you know is that the hose that are coming from the front, the 4 hoses, come back and they loop back like this. So come back in front. Next thing to do is you take the ratchet, come underneath here. If it's your truck that you're pinning and unpinning, then you won't ever have to do this again. Maybe you'll just have to adjust it. But as far as backing it off before you put it on, it's just like a one-time deal. So make sure that your truck is okay. So what we'll do is we're gonna back up, pin onto here, and well, that'll be it. Okay, so now we got the fifth wheel that's on, the wedge that's underneath. This is on bypass mode. So right now we'd be ready to go. So whenever the truck turns in relation to the trailer trailer has the back end deadheaded, so that's going to stay straight. Let's just say you had the back end that was a little off to one side and you want it to pull straight. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start the trailer, start the power pack in front, switch the hydraulic connections, and then you'd be able to have it so that you can just move the axles, tweak it one way, then you'd switch it back over. So what we're going to do next now is we're going to take our ratchet that we used to back it off, so it's a 1 1/4 notch wrench. So what we're going to do is we're going to start it up, the engine. We're going to put one of the steering switches on. What that's going to do, it's going to allow us when we go right and left, it's going to want to move the easiest things. So what we're able to do is steer that coupler back and forth like this, and it's going to allow us the wedge to work its way in so we have the least amount of mechanical slack. So we already took out this clip here. Normally this would always be in whenever it's adjusted. So we knew that we had to do this next step. So what I'm going to do underneath is start the engine, have the remote on, tighten this up, use the engine to go back and forth, and whenever it walks, just keep pressure on it and we'll be able to go in. One thing to note is with these remotes here, that whenever we turn this on, so say I turn on the remote first, so I'll turn this off. Say I turn on the remote and I turn on this, it actually doesn't, the receiver needs to be on before the remote, so there's nothing that happens, the little light comes on. But say I turn on the receiver first, then the remote, you can hear those valves clicking. So it's a bit of a particularity with these systems, but just make sure to have the receiver on first before the remote. I can hear the valves now, so I know that it's going to be able to turn underneath. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start the engine, and I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to use this to go back and forth. Just back it off, quarter turn, like this. So now that this is all married up to here like this, now it's fitted for this truck. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to do the auto steer. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have it as if we would have, say, a tower on it, and we want to have the steering on. Steering block is adjusted. Right now it's on bypass mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the pressure out, make sure that the brakes are released on the trailer, because we're going to wind up aligning the trailer as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch it over to manual mode, automatic mode. So we're going to come up here, and there's a red button on top here. I can just reach it. So these two gauges are at 0 now. Come back here. So right here there's a little red button. You just press this. And then this, if this is stiff or it springs back very quickly, it's because there's still pressure inside. So this is your plug. These go into here. What I like to do is these aren't greased now, but what you could do is after a couple of times there, you could put just a bit of grease on here, so then those don't seize up whenever the winter conditions come in. We're in the summer now, so it doesn't have to. So I just heard some oil go in, so that means that there's pressure on this side, not much you can do except to have this depressurized. So I'll click it, make sure this goes out. I lock this one, so there's always something inside. Now go in the front. So the first step, now that we're connected in the back, the first step is to align the front. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna move forward with the truck. We'll just make sure that this arrowhead comes to here. So you always line the front first, and then we're gonna do the back. So line the front, so the front's straight in relation with the trailer. So next is what we're going to do is we're going to essentially time the trailer. So the back axles, they've moved a little bit because we're connected with the axles, and I turn the truck. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have this. So I'm going to turn this on here, turn the remote on, then I can hear the valves clicking. And what I'm going to do, when I click the one valve on, I'm going to pressurize both circuits. Everything is like a big spring, so all the hoses are a big spring. So what you want to do is pressurize both systems. So when you're going around in the corner, you want the least amount of springs. You want to have a pre-tension. So you want these pre-pressures to go on. So I'll explain this here and here. There's the two steering circuits. So the reason why you don't want that second one on is if you have that second one on, you only pressurize half the system. So make sure to have just the one switch on here. We're going to go in the back. We're going to start the engine and go in the back. We'll align the back axles. We'll come back in front. So this is the alignment arrow here. So the brakes are released on the trailer. So what I'm going to do is going to make sure that the alignment arrow is flush like this. So what that means, so right now what we can do is have kill the engine, and the front and the back are going to be timed together. If you have a very long load and there's quite a bit of crown on the road, what you can do is you want to either bump it so you can climb uphill or downhill. You can do it a little bit with these. Don't do it too much, because then it's going to maybe screw around with the steering geometry. But you can go a bit just to help it to go up on the road or down. Sometimes the alignment, because it's so long, you're off just that little bit. It's going to have it off. So you're allowed to wind up coming back here and cheating it. Make sure brakes are off. A lot of the guys, what they do is they go back and forth quite a bit just to really unbind anything. Say the brakes were on. You come back, have this aligned like this, and we'll go back in the front. So once you've done that, you've worked the system, and that automatically generates that pre-pressure. You're going to be between 1,000, 500 whenever you start. If you're going on the road and you see them and they wind up going to 2,500, then what you can do is just start up the engine again, start up the receiver, and as soon as you move it, it's going to go down. Just make sure that it's timed. So if you do move it, just make sure that both alignment arrows are at the right spot. And with this now, you're ready to go onto the road and have it as an automatic steer. We're going to do a demonstration of the different modes that we can do with the trailer. Okay, so now what we're doing, we're set up. Normally you would have a tower on here. We don't have one today. So we're just going to have it so that we're going to be steering with it short. Everything is going to be exaggerated, but you get a feel for it. So right now, the two circuits are pressurized, and the front and rear are aligned. So what he's going to do is going to do a loop. He's going to come back, and you're going to see how the steering reacts and comes back. Once everything's pressurized, you don't have to. This engine is off. I'm going to close this. So he's going to start up, do the maneuver. He's going to come back, and when he comes back straight, we'll check that both systems are timed. finish the automatic maneuver. You can see here we made him stop, so this is aligned here. And then right at the back, the wheels, if you look carefully, they wind up being aligned as well. So whenever you do make a corner on automatic steer, if all your pressures are correct, that takes all the slack out, and everything is tight for your steering, you're going to wind up, you'll be able to make turns, and it's always going to come back to true center. What we do now, the next mode is assisted steer. So what that does, you're going to take the one switch that's closest to you, you're going to put that one up, and what that's going to do is whenever the truck is steering, so you're going around the corner, you just need a bit of help, or if you're going to be backing up, this usually really nice, is when you're backing up and you just want to, you know, touch it over a little bit to help the driver out. What you want to do is you don't want it to have this on while you're doing a very extreme maneuver, because if you start pumping the fluid into the cylinders and it's all the way to one side, and you turn that front coupler plate over to the same side as well, you're going to wind up having too much fluid in the system, and you want to bottoming out something. There's some relief valves and everything inside, but it's just very tough on the system. You don't want it to bottom out. So this type of mode here, I call it assisted, is just for very light touches. Also, as soon as you do an assisted maneuver like this, you're going to wind up putting fluid and taking out. So the system's not going to be timed again. So what we're going to do is we're going to back up, and I'm going to help him. He's going to be doing some zigzags, and then I can show that he's controlling it, and also I can control it as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start the engine. Only take the one switch. So now if I come back here, right now I can steer this, and I'm going to get him to back up, and he's going to be controlling it as well. So right now the truck's doing a jackknife, and the trailer's going to come towards me. Say I didn't want that, what I can do now is I can counteract what he's doing. Now the truck's going the other side, and it's steering, and I say I want the trailer to go straight. Let him go over once more. Then I can take the remote now. I'll just get him to stop. So now, we've aligned the front. If you look at the back now, obviously it's very exaggerated, but you can see that the system's out of time. So now what you have to do, as soon as you do this, you have to redo, is you need to line the front, go the back, make sure everything's straight, shut off your switches, and now you're back to automatic mode. Okay, so now the very last mode is the full automatic mode, and what that is as soon as you have the truck forward and everything's connected properly, you're going to be steering this truck, and then this block here now, the valves are going to go on, and it's going to essentially separate the two. This is going to go in bypass, and the back is going to be completely locked until I say I want to go right or left with it. This is obviously if you're in an extreme maneuver, you want to wait till the very last minute and you want to cut the trailer, or you're backing up, you want to zigzag out of place. This is definitely the maneuver you want to do. The way to get into this maneuver is you need to put both switches on, and sometimes it doesn't disconnect right away. You just need to bump it a little bit, and what it does is going to activate the valves inside just to switch. So sometimes when it doesn't quite do it, just give it a little nudge, and then she'll lock into full manual. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start up the engine. He's going to be going straight, and with the trailer I'm going to steer it to one side, and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to steer it to the other to show that I have total control of the trailer. So what I can do now, so I can go and steer right over, and now even if this turns in relation to the truck, these axles are going to stay planted where I left them, so I can go walk over, crab walk, do whatever I want on the intersection. And now I'm fine. I want to turn over to the other side. anytime you do this, the two systems are going to be not timed together anymore. So you have to go line up the front, make sure the arrow is good, then you come back here, have this arrow. Make sure to only have the one switch on so that you pressurize both sides of the system. Right now the two sides are separate, so when you go, you make sure to have it so that it's just the one switch is on, so you pressurize both circuits at the same time. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about loading this trailer. There's a lot of things to check out with this trailer as far as before you head off, just to make sure that the load's equally balanced, and also what to look for where the tower is going to apply its forces to. So there's two main configurations with this trailer. This here I have load distribution. This is with the Jeep here, so you'd put the insert on at the front. And at the back here, 3 we're going to talk about this little space at the back here. You can have it so that it's buttoned up close to it or right next to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the front. Right now we don't have a Jeep with it, so we have it close coupled here. Obviously you can have a 4-axle truck in front. So what you're going to do here is you're going to check when this is going to be loaded. We don't have a tower here, so we're going to have these bars here just to simulate as if there is a tower, okay? But if you would, those bottom hooks, that bottom piece is going to be holding the tower. So you're going to wind up seeing a gap between this plastic piece here and the tower, so it's probably going to stick out probably 3/8 to 1/2 inch. On top here, what it's going to do, those top hooks, the tower, all the weight is on those two pivoting skis, and the tower is going to wind up pressing hard against that top plastic. So there's going to be no gap at the top, a gap at the bottom. It's obviously going to separate it much further away. The other thing to really check out here is going to be for these saddles here. A lot of people, what they do is they put in some carpeting or some rubber side mats under here. There's different tower diameters. So what you're going to do is you might have to shim on both sides and leave the bottom just with the one layer so you don't scuff the tower. And on the sides you'll have a fair amount of carpet. In here, this is when you're going to be putting a tower on. What you're going to do is you're going to feed in the strap from here all the way to the other side. Tower is going to come up to here like this. So you're going to have a whole lot of room. So we have this square adapter here, so you'll be able to fit a ratchet in here. The trailer is supplied with a 3/4 inch ratchet drive, pick up darn near everywhere. And you're going to feed the strap to go all the way across. A lot of guys, what they do is they have a strap and they wind up having like a sock that is like a drainage sock that goes all the way around. So when you do tighten this down here, you're not gonna wind up scuffing the tower. And every single one of these needs to have a strap in it. So there's gonna be 6 straps during the whole length of the trailer. In here you're gonna have some more carpeting that's going to be underneath here to shim the tower. And now we get back here to these blocks. So as I showed in that drawing earlier, it was a bit extended out to here. The reason why that is if you want to load more of the truck with the Jeep, so you want to bring the center of the center of gravity forward. So what you do is you put these blocks here and the tower sits further ahead. So you wind up loading more of the truck. If you take these off like this, and then you set the tower all the way back here, then you're going to wind up loading more the dolly here. So that's why these 2 blocks exist here. There's also different bolt patterns. So this here can actually just stick out that little bit, or you can make it go in front. So this is also adjustable, this block. These ones just stay at the back. These D-rings here are very important. So on top of these smiley faces that are here, that because there's so many different tower models, what we do is we just leave them blank, and then whatever job you have, you just mark on what you want. You poke a hole in here with the torches, and then you can bolt up here like this. And then what you do is from here to the corner of the tower, same thing here. The D-ring, you make an X, you put clevises on both sides, you make this X in the back, you're bolted. And what that's going to do is whenever you're taking a corner, that dolly will never want to sneak out under you. We've never had any instances which it does. We've had some competitors that did. So we want to make sure that it never happens to anybody. So this is a system that we developed. So make sure to cross chain, you bolt in here, you put at least 2 bolts in here. If you can put more, then it's all the better. Make sure to shim inside of the 2 saddles to make sure that you don't wind up scuffing the towers. And you make sure to tighten down everything. You do a couple of miles, retighten everything down, make sure everything's okay, and you pretty well be ready to do the rest of the trip. One thing that's very important with this trailer loading it is there's only one leveling valve on this whole tandem group. So so this front group here is can be either too high or too low. Now it's going to be dependent on the gooseneck. These axles, this group in the back is the one that has the leveling valve. So this is what I call the pivot axle. So this one here is always going to be at the right height. So this one here is your baseline axle. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the airbag. Right now it's sitting at level. So we look at the airbag, and it's a quick reference just to see that the other axles are going to be at the same height. So you kind of note in your mind's eye that airbag there. What you can do is you can measure from the top of the axle to the bottom of the frame, and then that way you can really check how close they are. You want to be within 1 inch, so you measure from the top of the axle down. You want to be within 1 inch between the very front axle and the very back. So there needs to be a variance, so it can be down 1 or up 1. What we're going to do now, so this front group here, if you look at the airbag, you can notice that it's wound up being lower than that back one. So the problem is now is that since this is too low, this needs to come up. So either we would have too many shims inside here, so it's pushing that dolly back downwards. And the reason why you want these airbags to be all at the right height is that if they're not equalized like that, then you would wind up either putting more weight or not enough. So you'd wind up going on the scales, and you'd wind up being over or under on your axles, depending if you're too high or too low. And so you can take the shims in and out to level the dolly. Another way to do it, obviously, because we're short, it's going to have a very dramatic effect. When you're loaded up, you have quite a bit of a tower. So if you move this gooseneck up and down like this, it's going to want to bring up and down the front, so that pivot axle is at the back. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start it up, I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to put it too high just to see that the back axles are going to be at its right setting, and then the front ones will be too high. So then we wind up being light on the front end. So right now, actually, that might actually be at the sweet spot, the way it is now. So if we take a look at this airbag here, and then we come in at the back here, okay, so yeah, we're a little too high in front. So compared to two, it's actually not that bad right now. If you wind up being very, very close on a scale, you wind up having a hard time to have it so that you can scale out. What you can do is right here, this is a ratio valve here, and only use this as a last resort in the sense that you're very close, you're within an inch, and you're scaling out very close to your 20,000 per axle. What you can do is you can come here and say you're a little too heavy at the back, you need to put some in front. What this does, it can either increase or lower the air pressure in relation to this one. So say we're running 60 psi in the front, I want to run just that little bit higher. So what you do is you're going to go under here, there's a lock nut, and there's a threaded adjustment right at the bottom of the valve. It's going to be a threaded adjustment. Right now it's adjusted so that it's even. So I get 60 psi, I get 60 psi in front, or 70, doesn't matter. It always keeps the exact same front to back. Well, what you can do is you can tighten it up, and I can skew it. Either I can, add a little 2% at the back, 2% at the front, or I can take off 2%. So if it's a little heavy or too low at the scales, you have this trick here. You can either use the gooseneck to adjust wherever to make sure that it's even, or you can come here and just cheat it just that little bit. you can go on the plate and make sure that everything is weighed correctly. Then you'll be able to leave. Just make sure that when you do load up another tower, you just remember that you screw around with this just to make sure that everything balances out correctly. What we'll do next is we're going to split the gooseneck from the dolly. So let's just say we're at the work site, and we place the dolly, the crane's ready for us. So we're going to split this. We're going to move ahead and we're going to connect everything together. First thing we're going to do is disconnect all of the air and electrical lines that go in the back. So what we're going to do is depressurize the hydraulics. So these two gauges that are here are all depressurized. So this is the only time you're not going to connect anything to, this is going to be free like this. So make sure that you don't turn with the gooseneck with it hooked on, because then it might deadhead. We're going to move all this away. So here we have this on. They're all up like this. If there's one down, that means that one of the locks is locked. So it's going to pick one of these 4 ones. If it's down on one side, just go up or down, and then at one point it's going to pop up whichever one is down. So and once they're up like this, that means it's unlocked. Make sure that both of them are unlocked as well. So you might have to just go and move it back and forth, and at one time it'll work its way free. So what I'll do next is I'm going to start the engine. I'm going to lower this down. Sometimes you need to have some blocks underneath, just because sometimes the truck is a little too high for how far the gooseneck will go down. Another thing to note, that there is a safety on here that when you rotate the gooseneck, at one point it will stop rotating, so you won't wind up crushing it. So if you go up and it stops moving, it's because you're on that safety. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to lower it until these rods here, I pick up the slack in here. I'm going to store those, and then I'm going to use the stingers. I'm going to make sure to grab the slack into here. I've taken out both pins on the bottom side. I'm going to continue to rotate the gooseneck forward. That's going to give me enough room to actually take out the rod. I'm going to go back in. Holder right here for them. For the one pin, you're going to need another pin. Put it on, so this will just go in here. Put in the clip. Then there's another holder in the back here. And what that does, take this rod. Taking these bottom pins out, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the stingers. That's going to do is just going to pick up the gooseneck, because right now all of the forces is going down on the pins. So I'm going to open up these ball valves, unlock the stingers, like that. And these are however you want the gooseneck. I want the gooseneck to go up, so I'm going to take these and go up. If you look underneath, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look here. Whenever this goes up. So what we did is we took off the two main pins. There's actually a shaft that's right here, and what that does is it actually lines up that hook. So sometimes if the gooseneck is rotated too far forward, it's going to want to put pressure on the pins. So you can do is you just rotate that neck backwards like that, and then that will be able to give you some slack on the pins. What you do is you use a combination of using the stingers. You could roll it front to back, just so you have, there's quite a bit of slack in these, so when you see them jump, it's not, you know, like down to the millimeter. You'll be able to really see it jump and then stop, and then be able to take it out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up for the tower flanges. Let's just say that the tower flange is 3 inches thick. So we're going to go measure it, whatever we got. We're going to add 3/8, so 3 3/8. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have to be taking off some shims here. So because this is going to go inside of the tower flange, so this is at the bottom, this we're going to do first. So we're going to do this. So right in here, there's a bunch of like Torx screws right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to take these off. You're going to take off some shims. So we're at 3 inch. So what we do is we just take off a 3/8 shim. There's different size shims here, so you can pick and choose which one you want to have the correct thickness. I always pick, it's recommended to have 3/8 more than what the tower is, so you're able to take it out. No more than that. And then it's the same thing that's on top. You're gonna have those shims that are on top there. You're gonna go and measure, make sure that you have the right ones. Let's just say you're picking up a tower that's very big in diameter. You can wind up taking those hooks and moving them over. Same thing if you have a tower that has a lot of things in it. There's ladders, there's transformers, or cable trays, whatever. You can actually take those hooks and put it over to one side. If you're too locked inside, there's too much stuff, you can put there. But just make sure if you do one, you have to do both. They need to be mirror image. You can't have one that's narrow and one that's wide. The reason why that is that the forces, when they come down, the actual weight is supported by those skis that are on top, and they press down. So if there's one that's off to the one side, it's going to be lopsided. So just make sure if you want, you do both. So these top hooks here, there's all the same shims. It's the same as the other one. What you need to do is you can take these bolts out here. There's also a shim that's at the back side. So if this shim is not quite thick enough, there's actually another shim that you can put in the back of it. So right here, there's the two nuts that are in the back of it. So you have to go in, there's two nuts like this. Well, actually there's four, there's one locking nut. There's two nuts like this, that they're one above each other. So that's the same thing if you want to move it over. There's quite a bit of adjustment here. What you're shooting for is to have this. So we had measured there's going to be a 3-inch flange. So you want 3 3/8 here as well. Okay, the last thing to do is to take out these wrenches here. So what this is going to do is going to slack off the big bolts that are at the back of these main fingers. I'm going to go back here with these. Here we have the jam nut. So we're just going to put this off the jam nut. What this is going to do is just give us enough play so that we can insert those bottom fingers easily inside. Take this one. When this happens now is that you can rotate it like this now. Finger. What you can do is you can just insert it like this. Like this. Sometimes you have maybe a hard time to go over top. You can flip these around. And once you're on top, then you can flip them back down. But right now, for sure the stingers will be good enough to go high enough. So we can leave this like this. So what we're gonna do now is we don't have a tower today, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna extend it and have it as if we had a tower. So number one is to take out the boom lock pin. So I'm gonna do that right now. So I go up, take off this pin. You need to have this pin to, whenever you're going down the road and you're coming back, you guys have to make sure to have this pin. If not, this will walk up on you. The only time you want it out is when you're doing this maneuver. So go on the other side. What I'll do now is going to start up the engine. I'm going to put up the stingers as if we're going to be lining it up. What I want to do before is you wind up as you go and you measure where the center of the tower is. And you can mark a line here, the center of this here. It's in between these two holes here. What that's going to do is going to make you center up the tower with this. So if you pick it up to one side, it's going to roll, but it's inside of a dolly at this point. So there's not going to want to roll too far. So you're definitely going to want to be as close to the middle as possible. And also too, I brought a level. You'll be able to use these stingers here to level. So if your truck isn't quite level, you can use the two stingers to roll the gooseneck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it up. I'm just going to roll it side to side just to show you guys how that works. So we're going to lift it a little further up. Like I said, we can have that finger all the way over. And once it's inside, you can fold it back in. So I'll go and start it. I can lift it, and I can go from one side to another, and lock it, So now that I've picked it up, I'm going to do a signal the driver. We're just going to back up a foot as if we're going to be mating to the surface of the tower. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to mate up this surface here. Up here, there's quite a bit of plastic. You can mate up here like this. And then this, if you're not quite square, there's a trick. We're going to have it all go all the way up. We're going to put them top hooks in. And what we can do is we can just tilt the neck back like that. And what that's going to do is it's going to want to pull up here. So we're going to wind up pulling, so we're going to insert it, then we're going to pull back. And that's going to suck the tower up to here on this, and that'll help us tighten it up. So I'm going to do now, so I'm going to extend it so it's in that bottom flange. So I'm going to start the engine. So make sure there's air on your trailer. Have the valve out. So these knots loose. let's just say that was our tower. Obviously it's not a very tall tower, but let's just say that it was pretty well like a top that we were going to go and pick up. So now we would come in between inside of this gooseneck, and we would inspect with the top fingers. Those are the top skis. They wind up pivoting like this. So make sure you have a contact towards the whole ski. You can come up here, inspect it, see how it's sitting on top of it. So you go from the inside, you inspect on top, make sure that it's rested above. Here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna rotate the finger if you did, and then this will give you a chance, once everything's unlocked, is you can wind up sitting this properly at its right spot. What I'm going to do now is put the pin back in. And what you do is you just pick the hole that's closest. So right now I can see that this one here is the closest hole. And then this will drop down. You're allowed to drop down, you know, a couple of 3/8, but you always pick the closest one to where you want. Install this pin here, like this. I would go on the other side and install the other pin, so to lock this tower up. And then if you don't wind up having too big of a gap, you could use that trick where you'd wind up pushing or pulling on those top hooks, just so to get the tower married up to this face. What you do now is once everything's married up to here, you take this hook and then you would make it so that it's perpendicular with the fence. If you have a very small tower, it might be out to here or it might be down. Once you tighten this, there's actually a lock so it doesn't rotate. So what you do is when you tighten it up, just make sure that it bottoms out. It has that same gap. If it has too much gap, it's because you're on the edge of the bolt. That's that lock to hold it. So this is the bolt. It goes into a slot. If you're on the outside, it won't tighten up as much. So just make sure about that. So once we're gonna go in the back here, then we can go in here and tighten up the finger. Now what we got is, so this hook is all tightened down. We would inspect, make sure that we don't have no more than that 3/8 gap on top. Whenever you would use the gooseneck and you would tilt it backwards, it's going to want to lift everything, just like on a low bed. So the tower is going to, rest on this back here in the back pawl. That's why it's so massive. And it's going to want to squeeze that Teflon that's up there. So you're going to see a gap between here and the tower, but here is always going to be tight. Now the top here, you'll see a gap at the finger. So you see the opposite, you'll see a gap on the finger, and it's going to be resting on top of that Schnable. I'm going to install this, the umbilical cord. So we're going to put this cable first from this winch all the way out to the D-ring. And then once that's tight, so the tower would be on, you'd be on the front, and we're going to be connecting our dolly with our gooseneck. Now we're a little too close there. Normally you would just loop it up like this. Now it's snatch it like this. The only thing is that let's see if so we have it like this. Like this. Normally it'd be a lot longer, and you would use this crank here to put it as tight as you want it. You don't want it to be drooping down on the highway. And then to install this, the umbilical cord to the steel wire here. So a couple ways of doing it. You can have, if I do this here, and I'll tell you why we don't install them here in a second. So there's this way here, so you can have these along the length, like this. You can have a bungee cord without this last hook. So wrap it around and hook it back. There's this method as well. And then lastly, there's the absolute foolproof way of doing it, is just a zip tie. So there's these three ways. There's no wrong way of doing it. This one you need to cut them every time. This one here, it's a bit more prone to taking them off, and you have a bunch of them. And this last one here, this advantage is that once you have a whole whack of them, it's a real pain in the butt to put them back in, take them out, because they want to clip to everything. So it's really to each their own what they want to do. There's these three solutions. Obviously, the easiest one is this. The never forget anything is this, but it might be just a pain in the butt to really get it out. So it's to each their own to make sure that the cable management is done correctly. You would do the same thing on the other side. The other side isn't as critical, just for the fact that it's not as heavy. This one here, make sure it doesn't rub the ground, because if it does, then it starts skinning the hydraulic lines. It's a double redundant circuit, but if you wind up skinning through three of them, then you're into some big trouble. But if you skin just the one, sometimes just the two, then you're okay. So just make sure to pay special attention to this so it doesn't go down on you on the highway. Tie it up on your dolly at the back, all the straps, the cross chains, the bolts, everything's tied up here. Right at the front, the Schnable is all hooked up. You hooked onto it with a level, make sure everything's level. In the center, so everything's dead straight. Check to make sure that the dolly isn't too high or too low. So everything's all set up so that you can balance correctly. The load is secured. Last thing to do is to come at the front, start up the engine, line up the front of the truck to make sure that the arrow is lined up, and then you would go at the back, and then you would do the same thing. So then all your systems are pressurized, you're all tied up, and you're ready to go on the road and go where you need to be going. Okay, so now that you went to the site, you've unloaded the tower, so now we're going to put the two together. First step is to disconnect all of your air and electrical lines on both. And now what we're going to do now is we're going to back up in those pockets here. We're going to meet up inside here, and we're going to take the stingers, we're going to put them up, put the pins in, and then we're going to put the vertical rods. And then lastly, we're going to hook everything back up as far as for air and hydraulics. And then we'll show you how to chain up the axles. First, and then be able to fish them in here. So that's overhanging like this here. So when I'm going to tilt the gooseneck forward, it's going to drop into place. So I'm going to do it the other side now. Put the clips in here. Now while we're in here, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take it back up. And these chains on the axles here, what we're gonna do is whenever this is on the ground, we're gonna put these as far forward as possible So what that's going to do is whenever we pick up the front group, the wheels aren't dragging on the ground. Just make sure to don't forget it whenever you drop it, to put them back on, and you put the air in the front, that you don't snap these chains. So it's just something to take special care. So now everything's back to hooked up. Make sure not to forget to straighten out your axles. It's always best practice. Usually when you dump, you're straight anyways, but if they're not, you'd have to straighten it beforehand. So we've connected the air and electrical on the other side. Make sure your locks are down. So here there isn't. Just gonna start this back up once more. Sunroof in here, just make sure to close that so it doesn't rain in your engine. Make sure when you run it, and we had it open all day, just make sure to open and close it whenever you do need it. These engines do need a lot of air. If not, the intake likes to go, the plastic intake likes to go inside the engine, so just make sure to have as much ventilation as possible. So we pick the lock. The locks are on the gooseneck here. It's properly stowed here. We got our stingers lock here. You don't want to take your fenders off going around the corner. Braces are in. Everything's bungeed up. Just hanging a little low. I'm gonna tuck this up before I leave. And then this here, right now it's on auto, so I'd be able to adjust the steering. What I can do now, since it is lined up at the back, I'm gonna take this, put it on bypass, so that it pulls like a regular trailer. If not, it won't damage anything when you're empty. The only thing it's going to do is you might forget that you have it, and you might swipe another car. So right now this is dead-headed, it's locked. Here we have these, we're on bypass. I'm gonna lock this so nobody plays a cruel joke on you. Back, the air in here is dumped here like this. We got the riding height set up. Walk back here. I would have checked my alignment beforehand, and then lastly you would have the all of your air and electrical on the passenger side, and you're all ready to go and pick up another tower. So what we're going to do is go through the maintenance aspect. So it's obviously whatever you do for a normal trailer, plus there's all of the steering aspect of things. So number one is going to be all of these components here. So there's going to be the Honda engine, change the oil. You can put 10W30 if you're in a hot climate, or you could put 520 if you're in a cold climate. Inside here, there's nothing else that gives you trouble as far as for maintenance. The battery, just to make sure that you have all of the fluids topped up. Make sure that these are closed. Every time I open it, I always try to make sure this is closed. You have the filter element that's in here. Probably once a year I would change it. It's a function of how much you use it. Obviously if it's parked for a year, don't change it. But if you use it for maybe 6 months out of the year, then I would just go ahead and change it. It's real cheap. That protects the internals inside of your valve. So for inside here, that's pretty well it. On the other side, there's a hydraulic tank. It's ISO 15. It's like an Arctic oil. These systems don't generate too much heat, so there's no sense of having a very thick oil, nor to adjust for temperature variance. It's a pretty passive system, so just keep that oil light in there. Just because if you do have a load and you go into cold climates, then things are going to become stiff. So just keep the light oil in there. Everything will be happy. Coming underneath here, there's going to be a fair amount more maintenance points here. So number one, we're gonna for the fifth wheel adjustment, just make sure this is snugged up. It doesn't necessarily move, but you might have some, it might have worn in a little bit. So just make sure to tighten this up once in a while. In here, I like to grease the threads here so that this doesn't stay jammed up if you go into another truck and you want to have that in and out. In here, there's got these brass slides that are on each side of this big rod here. This is the most critical part about the whole system as far as keeping it greased. So whenever these slides aren't greased, sometimes they'll even stick to here and they'll actually pop these bolts off here like this. So it's very important to come in here, just have a grease. There's a grease bank here that greases all of here, and you have another grease bank just on top of the corner, and that greases all of the cylinders just because there's too much stuff on top, so we need to route them here. So very important to keep these happy. If you're going to grease anything, you make sure to grease these first, or grease them quite a bit. If it drips, the worst you're going to have is the grease that's going to drip down on you. Besides that, it'll be happy. So you have these top and bottom pivots here. And then also too, for these slides, there's a bolt that's right up here. And what that does is it takes up the slack in the system. So whenever these move back and forth, they're going to wind up wearing a little bit. So what you're going to do is you can just come in here and you just take this and you just snug it up just that little bit. So you snug it, then you back it off quarter turn, and you have the lock nut. There's a forward and a back adjustment for these slides here. So what you do is you just go in here and you just check these once in a while. Don't wait until the trailer starts, dog tracting one side or another. The tighter this system is here, the better performance you're going to get on your steering system. So it's make sure to keep this happy. Most of the problems that we do get as far as systems being loose happens in here. Most of the other stuff is just regular maintenance that needs to get done. Very important in here to grease that. Here you got the two independent stingers. There's grease fittings on those as well. Those pivot quite a bit, so just make sure to go and grease them as well. On the bogie here, the front axles are very standard axles. There's drop axle, but they have very common components. So all the slack adjusters, the drums, the hubs is all very much standard trailer stuff. So they just need to be greased, make sure that the oils are the right level. For them, make sure the cams get all greased. Coming back here, this is where it's going to be the most maintenance. So each axle here, this one is the master axle. So this one drives all the other ones. So inside you'll have the big cylinders. There's two bleed ports. Those aren't greasing ports, those are bleeder ports. That's to get rid of air into the system. At every pivot point there is a grease nipple. So either on the tie rod, on the main pivot, or all the secondary pivots all have grease fittings. So the way it works is you'll have your main pivot and you have these two rods that are on the top. These two rods, so there's two grease nipples for the main pivot, and each rod has one on each side. And then after that, tie rods will have each of the ends will have their own grease nipples. And then finally, right at the end, you have the kingpins for the steering. Those are going to be taking some grease as well.